Typography gets a little wild. Typography will continue to show movement in 2020. Type will move with animation, adapt to different shapes, and conform to a wider variety of objects. Expect typography to try to break traditional right-angle presentations and start to adapt to the world around them. There will be a shift away from blocky, unoriginal sans serif typefaces and a move into typefaces that have a little bit of personality. Like in this example where you see more contrast in the thickness of the stroke throughout different characters. You'll also see more typefaces on the web that have more slants, curves, and unique qualities to them. Expect more broken typography, with words scattered like a puzzle or broken glass. Type will no longer need to follow the logical left-right order as it breaks the grid and takes a more natural feeling. You will see a lot of repetitive type treatments to give off a bold statement. Look for more distorted, warped text too, or wrapped text. Text will bend to its environment and create almost a psychedelic effect. Warped text was always something that seemed more experimental in the past, like modern art, but expect to see it to go more mainstream and branded projects in 2020. After this lesson, we're going to hop into Adobe Illustrator and try out the envelope warp options to try out this effect ourselves to create the poster you see right here. And as support for more and more complex typefaces comes to the digital world, we'll see more designers loading in custom typefaces on mobile and web design layouts. One thing that'll help a designer better customize typefaces is the rise of variable fonts. Although still lacking in the amount that's available for use and download, variable fonts will change on the fly, and you can adjust the thickness of the typeface as you please. You can also change the spacing between characters, change it how condensed the typeface is, and some variable fonts take it a step further and allow you to change the typeface and add custom characteristics to it. Support for variable fonts is still new, so right now there's not a ton available for us to use, but they're still out there. In the downloadable link guide that goes with this section of the course, I will provide a couple of great resources if you want to know more about where to find these variable fonts. There's a wonderful website called the Font Playground, which gives you a chance to test out these variable fonts live with a variety of choices. This is something that needs to evolve and be implemented for a little while, but you need to at least have it on your radar as a designer, as variable fonts could be the future choice by designers worldwide in 2020 and beyond. So we are in Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to show you how to do that trendy warped effect that you're seeing right here. We're going to do our own version of this really quickly, and I'm going to show you how it's done. And it's a lot easier than you think. We're going to do some repetitive type, which is kind of another trend that we went over just a little bit earlier in the video. So let's go ahead and do some words. Let's open up a new document. So File, New, let's just do a poster size. We're going to keep things a little simple and just do an 8.5 by 11. In your case, you could do an A4, an A10, whatever kind of size is kind of your typical poster size. And this is going to be a small little flyer poster. So it's going to create. And I want to do some repetitive type, and there's a little trick I'm going to show you. So we're going to type in the words in all caps, design, trends. Let's go ahead and set the typeface that we like. Just scrolling down here to see what would be a nice, thick, chunky one to use. We can use any of these. Let's use this Azo Sans Uber, or I got another list of Azos. Let's just try something in the black, so it's not quite as harsh. So now I need to duplicate this over and over to create kind of that poster effect. So I could hold down Option and drag and continue to do that all the way down the paper, and that would take a little bit too much time. So here's a little trick. I'm going to hold down Option and drag, and that will create a duplicate copy. So now I'm going to press Command D. Just press Command D and hold it to produce as many duplicates as you want. And that's very helpful for shapes and lines. I just wanted to kind of demonstrate this for you. I'm going to do a simple pen tool, hold down a click, hold down Shift to make a straight line, switch that to a stroke, and I'm just going to make one copy first. So I'm going to do Option, drag, I just made a copy, and now just press Command D and it's going to replicate. as many times as you want. This is such a huge time saver. I wish I knew this 10 years ago when I was working in Illustrator. And of course you can hold down Shift, rotate that by 45 degrees to make kind of your little typical patterns that you see in contemporary art and design. So now that we have our repetitive words, we can change the typeface if we want to make it skinnier. It's never too late. So let's just do a thin. And we're going to start to warp this type. So how do we warp all this type to get that same bending, moving, psychedelic effect? We're going to use our envelope distort tool. And you can find that in the object panel. Go all the way down to envelope distort. So this is where we're going to be living for the next few minutes. So let's select all of our type. And we can even group these together. So just kind of grouping our type together. And then we're going to go to envelope distort. And there's a couple different options. The easiest one is make with a warp. And it's going to load all of your text warp options that you normally would have up here. But it's going to allow you to bend all these things in different manners. So we can bend it like that. This is using rise. And there's other ones such as fisheye, which can kind of bend it inward or outwards. You can see some really cool effects that you can create by simply doing the envelope warp options. You can even twist it, give it that cool effect. So let's go ahead and go back in our history, Command Z, just going back. Let's try something a little bit more advanced. So we're going to go back up to envelope warp, object, our envelope distort, and we are, instead of doing a make with warp, we're going to make with mesh. So if you've played around with gradient meshes, this is a very similar way it works. It's going to create a mesh for us. It's going to ask us how many rows and how many columns of anchor points we can edit to create the mesh. So how complicated do you want your mesh? And we want it to be fairly simple, so let's just do a very simple one, just 2 rows and 2 columns. And you can press on preview to see what I mean. It gave us a couple of different anchor points to manipulate. You could make that more complex if you wanted to. Let's stick with just 2 for now, just for an example. So now I can take my direct selection tool and I can click on any of these anchor points it created for me, and I can twist and bend to my liking. So let's say I want to shift this over, make it look like it's coming out. I can twist it and give it a twisted look. So what is great about all this is I can still change the typeface. The type is, and the font is still live. So all I have to do is just select the grouped text, and I can go up here and change this. If I wanted to change this to bold or black, I can, just like that. So let's start to reverse this. I'm just going to just put a black background here. I can even put this on another layer and lock it to make it easier, but just trying to demonstrate quickly. And let's make that white. So now you can kind of start to see that poster look coming together. So we can go back, let's say we want to continue to warp this a little bit. So let's go back to envelope, object, envelope distort. We can release it and go back to how it was originally without any warping. But we can also go down to edit envelope, and it's going to give us our controls again. Let's get our direct selection tool, and we can bend it on the side as well. So this is a very simple 2 anchor points per row, 2 anchor points per column. Let's see if we can't release this. So we can go up to object, envelope distort, and just release it. And we can go back, go ahead and delete that top layer, and we can go back and make this even more complicated. So let's do that right now. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Zoom out, and let's see if we can't make this a little bit more complicated. Envelope distort. We're going to make a mesh, and we're going to do 3 this time. So we're going to have a little bit more anchor points to control and warp. Get our direct selection tool. Let's twist this bad boy. Really make it unique and interesting. And each time I do this, it looks a little bit different. And you could do the sides as well. And this has control, so you can do your handles to have more smooth transitions. And twist. Twisting gives it that kind of 3D where it's going backwards and forwards, is that twisting action. And so let's say we're ready to add some effects to this. We want to add gradients. This is still live text. So let's say we want to create outlines on the text. This is going to be what we're going to do. We're going to go up to Object, Envelope Distort, and there's something called Expand. So let's select our object first and go down to Expand, and it's going to basically outline the type, and it's going to become one outlined object. So now we're free to work with this however we want. We can go to a gradient panel, and so you can see how easy it was to create this effect. You can warp this as you desire. And I wanted to show you real briefly that you can do this with something beyond text. You can do this with shapes and lines. I'm going to do what we did before. We're just going to click, hold down Shift, and I'm going to create a straight line. Just make it a white stroke. And we're going to do what we did before. We're going to just make a copy. I'm going to hold down Option and drag over. And then I'm going to use our new command shortcut, do Command D and hold down. And just like that, we created all of our equal lines. So I'm going to do what we did with the text. I'm just going to group this together. And now we can do the same warping options with this. And this is really gets really cool and interesting. So Envelope Distort, I'm going to make with a mesh. And let's do 3 this time. So we get 3 different points. So now we can get our direct selection tool and do the same thing we did before. But you could see how really interesting this could look. You can twist these lines, make some really interesting patterns. And you can see some examples of some I've created using the same exact method. In just a matter of minutes, you can create some really neat backgrounds as well and stay pretty on trend with some of this warped, distorted look. So your challenge now as a student is to go and practice this envelope to distort tool in Adobe Illustrator and see what you come up with your typography. And if you wanted to experiment with lines and shapes and other things, you could do that as well. I'd love to see your work and see what kind of neat stuff you come up with.